of victory and the agony of defeat.
Madison, great ball around the corner, Penasini, he beats them all! Junior Polar out wide, bumped away from Trindle, Sharks coming through, none of them can hold this!
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to wherever you are listening to our podcast. Your host, John, also known as 4020. This is the Tip Sheet Podcast. This is the preview edition of the Tip Sheet Podcast, and keen watchers and I suppose keen listeners in just 1 second might spot that we've got a third party this week joining myself and the big fella Craig. Welcome back to Chris Ricketts, who's here on board to break down round 22 and rounds 5 for the male and female sides of the competition respectively. As always, a quick hello to my two co-hosts in Craig and Chris, and I'll throw it over to you, Chris, first. How you doing, mate?
Very well. Thanks for having me back on, guys. It's been a couple of months since I last spoke to you, and it's been a very busy time for me. I've been moving from Europe. I'm now in Chicago in the US, so keeping up with my footy, but have been just sorting out a few life admin things at the moment, so it's just been a bit of a struggle. And I think probably the biggest challenge I've had is the time you guys usually record is about 4 in the morning here. So
and you're keen for the podcast, not quite that keen, understandably.
I love my footy, love speaking to you guys, but yeah, that's testing the friendship.
Well, it might also be stretching the marriage if you get up at 4 a.m. to record a podcast. John, it just dawned on me as well that your greeting just then felt like Jim Carrey and Truman.
Yes, there's a bit of Truman Show there. Yep, for sure. Yeah, yes, Jim Carrey.
Anyway, we're really jam packed with this podcast. It feels like we've just finished the last one, John? Like
quite literally, yeah. We've gone to bed on the back of the Tuesday news podcast, woken up Wednesday morning, and yeah, more football.
Just for our listeners, we're recording pre 9 a.m. So we're kicking off this recording about 8:45 in the morning after wrapping up last night around about 9:30 p.m. with the live podcast. So this is what happens with the quick turnaround with going into a Thursday game.
Might have to butt heads of Channel 9 about that 100% footy moniker. I think we've got better rights to it.
Yes. As always, a shout out to our sponsors, Star Partners Real Estate, Greg and the team at Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta for their ongoing support, the OG of sponsors at the Cumberland Throw. Also, of course, to Para Leagues, the home of the Eels, for their partnering with the Cumberland Throw. We're there on match days. We'll be there on Thursday up in Sturlos, around about 6:15 at this stage, John. So if you can head up in there, and we'll have our big preview of the match. We just have it. Our previews now, we're just there to have a bit of fun. And we enjoy having people coming up there, having a bit of a laugh, registering their opinions on our patented boometer, which we've been running there each week. You get to hear the opinions of other teams and other players, and people getting involved with that. So thank you to everyone that's been there and has had a bit of fun and got involved with the participation up in Sturlos. So we'll see you there this Thursday. And fellas, of course, no matter what platform people are watching or listening to this on, if you can give it a like and subscribe. We're really pushing towards the 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. We'd like to get to that on YouTube, but we appreciate the thousands of listeners that we have across all the platforms. It's much appreciated, and it helps to spread the word of the Cumberland Throw and our content. So, fellas, let's get into it. Kicking off, of course, John, with the Jersey Flegg clash.
Yeah, New South Wales Cup and Jersey Flegg coming back out of that global bye in both grades, which means there are 5 games on the preview docket this week. This is part of a double header out at Kellyville Park on Saturday, 1:00 p.m. Eels in 5th place hosting the 12th place Rabbitohs. Getting back at least a couple of players via Australian Schoolboys and also on debut. And we start with Cameron Bamblett at fullback, who is an incumbent Australian schoolboy. Well done to Cameron Bamblett for his fantastic performance at the carnival there, getting selection in that coveted squad. He wears that number 1 on his back for the Parramatta Eels. Making his debut on the wing from the SG Ball group is Lorima Rokosuka. He'll be running opposite of Muhammad Al-Madeen, with Faraz Nava dropping back from New South Wales Cup to take his place in the centres. And Will Lewis, the back rower turned centre, reprising his role out there. The coaching staff obviously really liking what Will can do out wide. But congratulations to Lorima for making his debut. Had a pretty good season until injury slowed him down, Craig. And this is obviously a big moment for him. So well done to the young man there. In the halves, it's Matty Hunter and Joshua Lynn. We obviously broke that news last night that Matty has taken up a very good deal with the Newcastle Knights. And he is now essentially traded places with Lorenzo Talataina. He drops back to from the New South Wales Cup to Jersey Flegg. And obviously will be a big part of his team still in their push for the finals football. In the front row, it's Bo Lucian, Paddy Spence, and Ryder Tuilagi. In the back row, Dom Destratus and Josiah Funarayuta will run the edges. Max Popo will be at lock forward. Plenty of SG ball talent there between Josiah and Max, as well as Ryder and Bo. And then on the interchange, Rafael Destratus, Lachlan Koinakis, Damascus Nemia, and Yeti Samuelu. Trace Beattie is the 18th man or concussion substitute. And yeah, they take on the South Sydney Rabbitohs. Just trying to see if there's any names that really jump out to me here. And doesn't look like there's any former Eels in the squad. Oh no, there is Yayo Yachi there at dummy half. So Yayo was a former pathways player for the Parramatta Eels. But it's the only one that really stands out there.
And John, where are the Rabbitohs sitting on the ladder at the moment?
They come into this game in 12th position, which, if I just pull up the Flegg ladder, it's 12 of 14. 5 wins, 14 losses. They're named versus Parramatta's 12 wins, 7 losses. So the Eels should be pretty firm favourites here. But
we're sitting fifth at the moment.
Fifth. We are 2 points behind the Cronulla Sharks and Penrith Panthers. And let's get you guys back in there. I don't know why that happened there. Sorry. 2 points behind third and fourth place teams in Penrith and Cronulla. And then 3 points behind the Raiders. And then we'll say goodbye to the Melbourne Storm, who've kicked ahead. They're 35 points total. They've lost 3 games. And one of them was against Parramatta, I'm pretty certain. So, Eels definitely need this win to stay in touch with the top 4. But looking at the ladder positions, they've got a very good chance of getting that win. They've got to take care of business, obviously, though.
Oh, absolutely. And Chris, it's interesting because the 18 players listed, of them, 8 of them were in this year's SG Ball team, and then you have a 9th that's playing New South Wales Cup in Lorenzo Talataina. So that graduation of talent from junior reps into the higher grades is well in effect at the moment, and there's even a number of players who've graduated who aren't listed this week as well.
Flegg have had a stack of other players from the ball team that are not part of it right now, whether it's been load management or injuries.
Yes, so it's must be exciting for supporters like yourself, even though you're in another country and you don't get to come along and watch in person, just to see the talent making their way through the grades.
Oh, for me, it's incredibly exciting. I think probably one of the knocks on the Brad Arthur era was the fact that they kind of maybe struggled to keep the pathways coming through as effectively. And what Riles has done is obviously he's knocked out a lot of the older players, probably got a few less journeymen in positions that would obstruct some of the younger guys coming through. And he's really trying to harness the talent that we do have. And Parramatta has such a reservoir of talent. I mean, the ball side, which ended up going through the regular season undefeated, and then unfortunately just seemed to have a bogey team in the Roosters. I mean, that's an incredibly talented team, and you're seeing those kids come through now. And I'm sure we'll talk about Lorenzo Talataina playing New South Wales Cup as well, but that could form the nucleus of the future of the club, and it's really exciting to look at, particularly when you see the young guns we've got in first grade already doing a great job.
Yeah, John, I'm really interested in seeing how Lorima Rokosuka goes this week, because until his injury, he was absolutely blasting away on the wing in SG Ball, scored some exciting tries.
It would have been a chance for the top try scorer, I reckon, if he'd stayed healthy. He was bagging quite a few of them, but yeah, just a really unfortunate injury. And, good to see him back in action.
Yeah, one of those wingers that's capable of the great aerials that you see from wingers these days. But I think probably looking at this team, there's some really crucial selection decisions because of the Bailey Simonsson being in New South Wales Cup. We've seen Araz Nanva drop back from New South Wales Cup to Flegg. That's a massive inclusion. Matty Hunter, who was the captain of the team, I'm assuming he's coming back as captain.
We don't have the C listed on the game portal, so be interesting if we get that clarity, but it's not in any official capacity right now.
Yeah, so but having him come back is a massive in for the team because he was in spectacular form before his elevation, and having him in the halves, I think it might also help to bring out the best in Josh Lynn as well, who's had probably a mixed bag of a season. He's had some really terrific games, and then some games where both he and the team have struggled. And he sometimes in those circumstances, you don't know whether it's a chicken and the egg. Has it been that he'd struggled in the game that the team struggled, or had he struggled because the platform hadn't been laid by the forwards? I mean, the coach is the one that makes the call on that. But that back row pairing of Dom Destratus and Josiah Funa-Iuta, that is a powerful, powerful back row pairing. So I can't do anything more than to tip a win here because I think not only the ladder position, but also the strength of the team that the Eels have been able to name this week says to me they'll get the job done.
And hopefully the bye came at the right time for them because they managed to bag that win. They've been really hot, cold, had a nasty losing streak, but held on against the Canberra Raiders. That was a big win. And hopefully that gave them the sort of momentum to go into that bye, recalibrate and retune for that big final push into the finals that's coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. John, I think maybe we might go with New South Wales Cup because then we can go back to back with Harvey Norman and NRLW after that. And I think it also flows nicely to go from Jersey Flegg into New South Wales Cup, especially with regard to a couple of selections.
Yeah, and obviously chronologically, this is the other part of a double header on Saturday out at Kellyville Park, so a nice 1-2 punch there. This game sees the third place Parramatta Eels hosting the 13th place South Sydney Rabbitohs, and I believe that is 13th and last. Rough year for the Rabbitohs. They're down the bottom across Flegg and Cup, but they come into this one looking for that upset win, but also getting their backsides handed to them before the bye is probably the nicest way of putting it to them. The New Zealand Warriors, the all-conquering New Zealand Warriors, dusted them up. I think it was 68-6 before that global bye. For the Eels, though, which is the side of the team list that we do care about, they look like this. At fullback, it is Apa Tuidal or Te Horonui Apanui Tuidal. In the wings or on the wings, Jake Tungor and Hayes Dunster will work the right and left sidelines, or left and right sidelines, sorry. Richard Penasini and Bailey Simonsson, you mentioned Bailey getting bumped into this team. That's your centre pairing there. Jason Riles choosing not to make a change to that NRL team list, which means that Bailey features in the New South Wales Cup this week. Making his debut, Lorenzo Talataina, big one right here. We'll talk about that for sure. He'll partner Ronald Volkman in the halves. Front row sees Woody Widdemugregg, Joey Lussick, and Tony Matayelli is a very seasoned and very good front row trio there. Jordan Samrani, Kelma Tuilagi, and Dan Keir. Talk about talent and experience. That's a pretty handy back row on cup level. Obviously, Kelma making his way back from that 3-game suspension has been jumped by the likes of Charlie Geimer right now for that winning formula. So he has to make his way back into the NRL the hard way and get some good reps in here against the South Sydney Rabbitohs. On the interchange, it's Manny Luke, Brock Parker, Saxon Pryke, and Tyrese Lakini. 3 o'clock p.m. out at Kellyville. So a great 1-2 game or set of games there for anyone that's getting out in the area. But you can also get this one on New South Wales TV and TCT as well.
Chris, to me, it's a New South Wales Cup team, which is almost reflective of what Jason Riles is trying to do with the first grade team, in that there's that blend of some experience and plenty of promising talent coming through. How do you see this New South Wales Cup team?
I mean, coming into the bye, as Jono mentioned, in Flegg and Cup, I mean, the nature of those grades is you always have plenty of chop and change, because they're ultimately there to support first grade in some way, shape, or form. But they'd had a lot of churn in their rosters over the preceding maybe 4 to 6 weeks or something like that. This looks like just about the strongest team they've put on the park all year. I think you've got some guys who've been up and tasted NRL action, and they'll be coming back, and they'll be better for that experience. You know, the likes of Samrani, etc. Then you've got Kelma coming back. I question whether or not maybe he will force his way onto the bench by game day. But I mean, after such a great last start win, maybe Riles is reluctant to change the NRL team. But I mean, top to bottom, this is the best Reggie's team I think we've had in about 3 or 4 years. I think they'll absolutely hammer Souths in this one. I think they'll put a score on and continue their march to a top 4 berth.
And of note too, for South Sydney, they've got Matthew Humphries and Lewis Dodd named in the halves. You'd assume one of them would have to come into play for an NRL promotion too, given that, as named, Jack Whiten was starting in the halves for their NRL team. And as we covered last night in that breaking news from the judiciary, he did cop that 4-game suspension for the shoulder charge. So South Sydney are going to be prospectively even weaker in the Cup team when it comes to kick-off on Saturday.
It's been very interesting what's happened with South this year. Yeah, they've been pretty bashed around by injuries, arguably worse than what the Eels have. And we've felt that the Eels have been smashed by injuries and also some pretty tough suspensions along the way. The Rabbitohs, it was a sliding doors moment, wasn't it, when the Eels didn't pick up Wayne Bennett as a coach. And I think Bennett knocking back the Eels was probably the best outcome for our club, given that he wasn't first choice. And there's everything about the way that Jason Riles has gone about his business and the team of coaches that he's got with him that says we're a team of the future. And you look at the Rabbitohs and you go, well, how much longer is Wayne Bennett going to coach for? Let's be realistic about it. Is he setting up a future, or was he intended to be the coach who could immediately turn around their fortunes? Because I think they were aiming at the latter with that. And when you also think that, and this isn't a knock on them, but he then acquired Steve Antonelli from the Eels as one of his assistant coaches.
Yeah, core pickups for his assistant coaching staff. Yeah.
Yeah, so...
and also took
Eels,
on Trent Elkin too, I believe.
And Trent Elkin as head of athletic performance. Now, as I said, that is in no way a knock on those fellas, because what I'm thinking as well is, if the Eels had secured Wayne Bennett, would there have been the turnover in assistant coaches at the Eels that we've since seen? Would he have then retained those people as members of staff at the Eels? And as a consequence, would you have seen the level of radical change within the Eels that we've seen this year?
Good question. And I tend to agree that you probably wouldn't have. And I suppose the funny reflection on this for me is that you talked about, it didn't even occur to me because I'm sort of not repressed, but just completely forgotten that Wayne Bennett was a first choice coach. It's funny how, as different as the situation is in many regards, you look back to how Brad Arthur came to be Parramatta coach. He wasn't the first choice coach. It was Jason Taylor. And in a way, it clearly ended up way better for Parramatta Eels after a good 10, 11 years under Brad Arthur. And hopefully Jason Riles can be much the same, where he goes another decade plus and obviously gets us the big one in that premiership. But yeah, it's funny how sometimes not being the first choice doesn't mean you weren't the best choice.
Well, I would argue that Jason Taylor probably would not have been able to guide the Eels through the salary cap dramas
Goodness,
of
no.
2016. We know Ricky Stewart saw the writing on the wall and got out of Dodge as quick as he could, and you can't blame him for that. And he ended up at a club where he has a passion for that club, and we ended up with a coach who had a passion for the Eels and ultimately guided the Eels to a grand final. And we didn't get the job done against a team which, let's remember, the Penrith team that the Eels faced in 2022 was better than the Penrith team that has won the next 2 years because they lost personnel.
It was perhaps the 5 grand finals of 4 years of winning, perhaps them at their peak, like the best iteration of Penrith. So, Parramatta things meeting the best form of them.
So, John, this Eels team, as Chris just said, I think it's a team that's going to thump the Rabbitohs. The Eels have done well when they've been weakened as an outfit.
Yeah,
where
Backs
we've
to the
thought
wall.
that where we've thought that they were on a high, that they were going to get a hiding, and either put in a miraculous effort to just go down or actually conjured a win. And they've stayed up near the top of the table for the entire season. And I'm looking at that team, and we don't know what the future holds for someone like Woody Wiramu Greg at this stage. I'm not sure what the future holds for Hayes, whether he's there next season or not. Rumours Brock Parker might be moving on to another club.
Joey Lussick.
And of course, yes, Joey Lussick. So there are players there that might be in their last season with the Eels. I guess that's a wait and see, and Jason deciding which ones might be good to retain as far as depth options are concerned versus does their retention block a pathways player from coming into the following season. So, however, it's hard to argue with the fact that that's an outstanding pack at New South Wales Cup level. There's some exciting players off the bench in Saxon Pryke and Tyrese Lakini. And we're seeing the first appearance, as you said, John, of Lorenzo Talataina at senior level. I find it an interesting halves pairing because I regard it as 2 5'8s playing together.
Ronald Volkman is not quite a halfback, but he's more than a 5'8 in that regard. Like, he's probably like the best set in terms of that skill set to assume the additional responsibilities of putting a 7 on his back. But obviously Dean Hawkins would be the primary 7 in the ideal circumstances here. But Volkman has done a pretty good job. I mean, when he's been asked to steer the team around, and this is obviously circumstance forcing him into that primary playmaking responsibility where he'll take heightened responsibilities this week because of Lorenzo's debut. But that's not to say they're not going to. I don't think they're going to hold Lorenzo back this week, Craig. I think they'll tell him to go out there and play football. They're not going to, he'll be asked to kick, he'll be asked to run and pass. So it's not going to say, well, just focus on this particular aspect. I think there'll be some streamlining, and they'll say, when you got a chance to run. But he'll also kick and do all the other playmaking responsibilities. But yeah,
John, I'm pretty sure Lorenzo will be doing at least part of a preseason, if not a full preseason.
Based on what we saw from this past preseason, I'll be stunned. And given that the club has publicly endorsed him too as a potential heir to that number 6 jersey, I'll be stunned if he wasn't part of that NRL preseason.
Yeah, so like you, I think they'll let him take on full responsibilities, and it's a case of let's see what he's got.
And given how he took to the Jersey Flegg, he didn't have, not to say he hasn't had some adjustment issues along the full course of it, but he hit the ground running in the Jersey Flegg. And I think he's going to be the same here. His energy, his willingness to engage the opposition with his strong running game, and he's just pound for pound strength. I think he could have a good debut here, as long as he doesn't try and overplay his hand.
Fellas, I'll tell you why I think he might have a stronger debut at New South Wales Cup than Jersey Flegg. Lorenzo's very much an individual player. And by that, what I mean is he'll play what's in front of him. a lot more than, say, other players will. He's not a player who can only see structure in front of you. Now, as a consequence, that can be hard for teammates to read. They're maybe unsure of what he's going to do one moment to the next. Now, he got to have that stretch of pre-season through to the competition proper with the SG ball. So the players became very familiar with him. But I think in Jersey Flegg, there's been an adjustment period for the other players to be able to read what's Lorenzo going to do in this situation or that situation. And I think that's probably led to a little bit of fluctuation in form, John, from Lorenzo at Jersey Flegg. However, the players in New South Wales Cup are a little bit more seasoned.
Yeah.
You got some blokes there that have played first grade. They've been around the traps a bit longer. As players, it's interesting sometimes to observe, because there are some players who, as they progress through the grades, actually look better. The higher they go up through the grades, the better they look. And it's because of the players around them. And I think that may well be the case this week.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So we're in accord with hopefully a strong Parramatta victory in this grade, which takes us to the third game on the docket as we head back to Kellyville, but on a Sunday, 12 o'clock p.m. kickoff here in the Harvey Norman Women's Premiership as the Eels host the Penrith Panthers. If I just bring up my HNWP ladder, it is the 7th place Eels hosting the 8th place Panthers. 2 wins, 2 losses for Parramatta, 1 win, 1 draw, 1 loss for the Penrith Panthers. And the Eels look like this. A couple of changes across the team, but nothing too outrageous. Ella Carlisle's at fullback, Paige Knapp and Caitlin Pearden on the wings. Josie Lenars and Kiana Takarangi are in the centres. Aaliyah Sufan moves to 5'8" for this week as she partners Rosemary Beckett, who dons the number 7. In the front row, Ruby Jean Kennard-Ellis heads the forward pack with Taylor Falanico working in the front row alongside her. Chelsea Makira is your dummy half. Jess Kennedy captains the team on the edge with Fontaine Tafur, another excellent young talent there on the opposite side of the park and the edge. Ashley Pottinger is your lock forward. Moving to the interchange, it's Ava Jones, Kylia Gray, Alana O'Loughlin, and Matoisha Kalepo. Got a trio of substitutes or extended bench players here in Dallas Graham-Wivell, a young fullback, Matisse Bettridge, who's played in the halves, and Liana Dimmick, who was a front rower. So Eels taking on the Panthers. Any familiar names in that Penrith team? Jacinta Tui was a former Parramatta Pathways player, I believe. And then beyond that, I'll tell you what I've noticed. There are a lot of Vellas going around. A lot of Vellas. There's a Matilda Vella here. And I think there's obviously Luke Vella, the coach at the Bulldogs. But Parramatta also have their own Vella in the system too. But yeah, I'm not sure they're all related to the big man himself, but it's just a lot of Vellas going around, and Penrith certainly have one right now.
John, I think I've actually done a little bit of research just for fun on Maltese surnames, and I think it's almost like a version of Smith to have Vella. But on top of that, I think with Malta being the island nation, that there was, I'm sure there's like something like 60 surnames that are common across the entire population.
That is your logical and makes sense explanation. It's just, it's funny that all of a sudden there's just Vellas everywhere. And obviously Michael Vella being the famous Parramatta Eel, when his son does play for Parramatta in the Pathways. But just funny seeing all of them pop up. And sometimes there is a familiar connection, but I don't know.
I love the Maltese people. We know we've got some great Maltese people that have been associated with Parramatta. Of course, the great Joey Grimer,
yes, Joey.
Craig Sultana, who's the NRL football manager, and obviously a host of other players and staff that have been involved over the years. So send it out all our love to not just the people that have been associated with the Eels, but all the great Eels supporters of Maltese heritage, because we know there's a lot of you out there. And the Hills District was always great for having a great population of people of Maltese heritage. I think the market gardens that used to be out there especially around the Kellyville area and what have you, had and the love that Maltese people have for for that aspect of work in the past has produced that rich cultural heritage in the Hills District. So anyway, again, shout out to all the Maltese people out there listening. And but John, how many have we got in this Eels Harvey Norman team that were in the Tasha Gale? I'm looking at that list, and I think there's about 8 from this year.
From this year's squad. You start with Elias Sufan, Taylor Falanico, Fontaine Tafua, 3, 8, and then the entire bench. So it's 7 officially, I believe. But you've also got a number of Tasha Gale graduates with the likes of Caitlin Pearden, Rosemary Beckett, Ruby Jean Kennard Ellis, who else? Ashby Pottinger. So yeah, between current graduates and post and Tasha Gale alumni, you've got about 11 players in that squad that are Parramatta pathways, which is fantastic when you're trying to get lifeblood into these new systems and this fledgling reserve grade competition.
Chris, we spoke before about the number of Eels Pathways players who were coming through into the Jersey Flegg team and seeing those graduates. The Harvey Norman's team functions as effectively the reserve grade for the NRLW. So arguably these young ladies have made a faster progression because they don't have an under-21s comp that they can go into.
Stepping stone straight into reserve grade.
Yeah, and even to the extent where we've seen 2 of this year's Tasha Gale team playing in the NRLW in Riverlea Arlo and
Tess McWilliams,
and also and Tess McWilliams. It's been this has been the epitome of pathways working when it comes to the female space.
Yeah, and I guess if you've got 2 premiership winning teams in the Lisa Faiola and the Tasha Gale team, it's a pretty nice position to be in if you have to try and expedite the progress of some of these young ladies. So it's exciting. It's going to be great. I think Parramatta could be set up for success on the women's game for some time in the future, the way we're shaping.
I think this is going to be a tough battle. I mean, Penrith always love to turn up against Parramatta regardless of the grade. But Parramatta's 2 losses did come against the Cronulla Sharks, who were in 4th place with just 1 loss to their name, and then the undefeated Illawarra Steelers. Both of those were quite narrow defeats. In particular, against the Illawarra Steelers, it was 2 tries in the final couple of minutes that broke a 12-all deadlock. So their performances have been there on the field. They come into this game on the back of consecutive wins, playing some really good football, particularly last week in that 16-12 win against the Newcastle Knights, who are in 2nd place in the ladder. That was a lone loss for the Newcastle Knights this season. It's been this is a season of building and progress and development for a young squad, and consistency is always going to be the most difficult thing to achieve. So that's why I look at this game and say that Penrith could give them a real big battle here. But based on the potential of the squad, I think that a 3rd straight victory is absolutely within the realms of possibility.
Yeah, it looks like they're finding their feet, John. When I went and watched the trial at the start of the year, and it was, unfortunately, didn't have a team list to look at who was running around out there. So it was trying to look for familiar faces out on the field and lots of players swapping and changing and what have you. But they looked like a group of players who had been pulled together from that mix of senior players from other maybe from other clubs and also the young pathways players, and they didn't look like a team, to be fair, and it looked exactly like it was a trial. And in comparison, the Bulldogs team were very, very dominant against them. You could see now as the first few rounds of the Harvey Norman has progressed that they're gelling as a team, because the talent was always there when you looked at the pathways players that's coming through. The exciting thing is some of the pace in that team, and we mentioned the fullback Ella Carlisle.
Yes,
and there's some highlights that are out there that people can have a look at of of her pace in action, just ripping past opposing defenders. So, John, I think they can go on 3 wins in a row
3 in the
here.
trot, yeah.
Yeah, 3 on the trot. So, and it'll be interesting to see if there's any late changes to the team, with any late changes to the NRLW team. But let's now jump into the NRLW preview, because we're really looking for them to bounce back this week.
Yeah, odd week Eels. We made that I suppose identification last night on the show, and Eels have gone win loss thus far in the season. They go on to round 5 now, closing out Magic Round for the ladies. This means they're playing out at McDonald Jones Stadium on Sunday. It's a 3:45 p.m. kickoff as the 6th place Eels take on the 8th place Dragons. Eels with a change this week. Abby Church at fullback, Zoe Fay and Martha Mattelli on the wings, Rory Owen and Lindsay Tui round out the unchanged backline, which also features Cassie Tawihiku and Rachel Pearson in the halves. Elsie Albert, Ruben Cherrington and Brianna Eels starting front rowers. Chloe Jackson, Captain Mahalia Murphy on the edges, with Riverly Arlaw, that young player you mentioned before, Craig. Tasha Gow, graduate straight into the NRLW, doing fantastic. The change, though, comes on the interchange, because Tanika, Todd Hunter, Paige Travis and Fleur Ginn are joined by Kennedy Cherrington. Massive in there for the blue and gold as she comes back from that, I believe it was a PCL knee injury, a posterior cruciate ligament she sustained in Origin, and gets her first action of the season for the blue and gold. Massive inclusion there. Extend the roster: Tess McWilliams, Ruby Jean Kennard Ellis, Rosemary Beckett, Yasmin Baker, Tyler Amiatu. Also interesting to see what they do with Tyler, fellas. Not featuring that HNWP team list. I don't know if she'll be a late inclusion on either NRLW or HNWP squads, but maybe she just gets a week off too and just builds back towards a return in the coming games. But another potential player to monitor. And yeah, they take on the Dragons, who have lost Tegan Berry, which is a big out for them, but still got plenty of talent there. Racine McGregor is a very good halfback. Zoe Hopkins, their captain's talented too. And then obviously go to former Parramatta Eel Nita Maynard, Perrin, who can be dangerous at dummy half, and Hannah Southwell at lock forward also jumps off the page there. So Eels need to be on their best here, best form, best approach to this game. And yeah, this is a real chance for them. It's a home game away from home, which is unfortunate, but a real good chance for them to try and straighten out some of those kinks that have kept them from being able to be consistent winners coming into this game with 2 wins and 2 losses on the docket.
Chris, we spoke last night with Mary Kay about the NRLW team, and one of the topics we talked about was that we don't have a great home record, and then the argument, do we actually have a home, like a pure home ground at the moment? Because there have been games that have been played at Granville Park, at Eric Tweedle Stadium, games that have been played at CommBank, and then we end up with home games that have been played at away venues, just as part of the scheduling of the NRLW the last few years. I think we had a home game, a scheduled home game down in Canberra last year. We've got this home game that's being played as part of Magic Round this year. Have we got a home ground identity yet, in your opinion?
I mean, you've just outlined the case against it, 60s. I would like to see them just play all the games at Kellyville. I can understand you don't always want them to be a curtain raiser for the men, because it sort of it always has them playing second fiddle there, and you want them to create their own identity. But I just think we've got a great stadium out at Kellyville. I think it's the appropriate size for the crowds that they're generating right now, and I think if you got them there, you could build up a bit of a following, and you could actually start to get some advantage there. But no, we see it in the NRL as well, don't you? When you've got a club like the Tigers, for instance, who splits their home ground between about 4 different venues, it becomes really difficult to create that sort of identity, and it's true for the women as well. So, no, I would agree with you, and I'd like to see them play their games at Kellyville.
Okay, so my next question to you is, a game like last week where they absolutely got blasted out off the park, and being honest, it wasn't just that Newcastle were good, it was that we were poor. How much of that can you push to one side and just go, look, that was one of those games, And how much does the coach have to look at that and go, look, there's been maybe some common denominators in all the performances thus far. We really need to address this or address that.
Well, you guys touched on it at some length, I think, when you discussed the fact that we've never played Newcastle well. I think, Jono, did you say we beat them in the first game we played them?
I think first time we met them was a real scrap, and then they've got us every other time.
So, look, I mean, we've started the season sort of 2-2. We had a great win against the Sharks in Cronulla. I think there's plenty of positives to be taken from the season so far. I would like to see how they perform this weekend before you start to make any sort of drastic sort of changes or draw any major conclusions from what we saw last week. I suspect it's a matchup thing there. That Newcastle team, we just struggle against them. So, yeah. Look, if they lose this weekend, then maybe it would be time to start looking at a few different ways of doing things. But right now, I think let's see how they go.
Yeah, John, I look at this team and I think Kennedy Cherrington is such a massive inclusion this week. It's what she brings to the team. It's that mix of tangible and intangible, because you know how she's in the face of opponents all the time. The way that she just stays involved in every aspect of the game and reminds opponents that she's there. Just she's literally in the faces of key players in the opposition team. It's you would imagine that there are players that when they line up against the Eels aren't looking forward to it because of Kennedy's presence in the team, just constantly asking questions, both of the ability of the opponent and also their temperament.
Yep.
As well. And then there's that intangible of that, what that energy that she has brings to other players that play alongside her, that they lift when they see how she performs. I think Ruben's had, to an extent, brought some of that this year as well, because I think she's having her best season so far, is looking really accomplished at dummy half and has that capacity to play then a middle forward role as well. Like they can leave her on the field and bring Tanika Toddhunter into the action as well. So it's her role is developing also. There was the attack still hasn't clicked for mine this year for the Eels, and I'm glad that they've got a bogey player not running around for the Dragons in this game, in the fullback, whose name escapes me off the top of my head, John, the missing fullback for the Dragons.
Tegan Berry.
Tegan Berry, yeah. She always seems to have a cracker of a game.
Yeah, just
against the
out and out speed's always hard to put a lid on, and Tegan's got that in spades. So that is a big out in this game, and I think it does tip the scales towards the Parramatta Eels, alongside Kennedy's inclusion for the reasons that you listed. You know, as you said, tangible and intangible. I think for the Parramatta Eels, the big challenge this week is the two sides of their game that are kind of yin and yang, or oil and water in the first few weeks, where they want to be direct and confrontational through the middle with their big forwards, but they also want to shift the ball wide and get to their attacking weapons on the edges. And they haven't been able to get those two phases of the game in sync. There have been times where, obviously against Canberra in particular, it looked a lot better, but they haven't been able to find Lindsay Tui and Rory Owen out wide, or Chloe Jackson down the right edge too. And they've been too focused on getting Elsie Albert, Brianna Eels, you know, all the big middles there, a lot of ball, which I think was the problem is it worked against Newcastle with breaks to Elsie Albert and Mahalia Murphy that didn't lead to points. So getting those things in phase is what's going to make them not just winners, but potentially formidable winners. And I think that's the big question for their season now, is can they get everything into alignment with their offensive identity? And defensively, again, this was brought up by someone in chat, Hartley, on I think they need more line speed, more aggression, because they're going out there with some big hits, but their consistency of the defense has really been an issue, and they were way too passive against Newcastle. And that's not just a Newcastle thing. If you're that passive against any team, they'll plunder huge meters and they'll find line breaks, and that leads to points.
I think that's an incredibly valid criticism, John, is watching the game live, Newcastle seem to be playing a metre faster than the Eels.
Yep.
But reflecting on it, that was primarily because the Eels were on the back foot when Newcastle were in possession. And there were times where Newcastle were moving the ball and it almost looked like a training run in some respect. And what I mean by that is they were given far too much latitude to get their timing right. There was no pressure on the reception of the passes. You were just looking at it, and some of the play just looked so crisp in comparison. And then you reflect on it and think, well, that's because they're running at a team that's been quite passive. And in contrast, the Knights, they were moving up in attack. In defence. And you mentioned about the line breaks that we did make through the middle, but there was no support. We just fell down in support play, and I don't know who you'd mark down as being guilty of not providing the support that would be needed. Do you point at players in the spine for not being there as backups for breaks through the middle? Do you blame the edge for not pushing up quickly? The centres, the wingers. There was nobody there. That long run that Elsie went on, where in the end she was trying to transfer the ball from one hand to another to look for a miracle pass, and it simply ended up looking like she threw the ball away. But the length of that run, and with respect to Elsie, it's not like she's going to break any 50-metre sprint records, and no one got within cooey of supporting her.
Yeah.
So you have to be blunt with that level of criticism, that it was one of those games where there were multiple aspects of the game that just didn't happen for the team. So much so that I'm prepared to put it down as being one of those games, but with a lot of coaching points there for Steve Georgalis to be able to work with during this week and fire the team up and say, look, we're really going to need to lift in this area, this area, this area. And I'm sure training this week would have been focusing on those things. I think the Eels can bounce back. And I think it is essential for their season that they do.
That's my point I was going to raise, is this is pretty much must win. If you're serious about making that top six and pushing into the finals, you currently occupy the final spot in the provisional finals standings on points differential. You're 4 points ahead of the Bulldogs. You need to start making those wins, and a win here keeps you very much in the hunt. A loss means that you have to pretty much win out, and then maybe have results go your way too, as traffic on the ladder gets congested.
Now, one thing before we move away from the NRLW and into the big match of the weekend in the NRL, where I want to encourage supporters is when the Eels play at grounds like Granville or at Kellyville, as they did in the trial, they are great venues to get to with the family. So if you've got young kids that want to be able to meet the players and interact with the players, you cannot get more than what the Eels NRLW players do after games. So at Granville last week, the game's over. They've suffered a loss, but they actually came up into the stands. They came off the field. There were a number of them as well that were on the fence there and signing autographs and having photos, but also a number of the players came up into the stand and were meeting supporters there and chatting with them, signing autographs, having photos, all that sort of thing. It's great to see the kids that are there being able to meet their NRLW heroes, and the time that the players give to the supporters in that context is great. You couldn't ask for more. If you're talking about a football experience where the kids get to meet their heroes at the game, you can't go past going to an NRLW game. And I'd really encourage supporters to get out to some of these smaller venues, because they're the ones where you are going to get that personal experience of meeting and talking to the players. So, and honestly, a shout out to the NRLW players, because they really embrace that ambassador aspect to the game.
Massively.
And, I couldn't speak highly enough about them. And of course, we got a special place in our hearts for Kennedy, because she was on a special edition of the podcast when we chatted with her, and she's always been, as soon as she sees us at these venues, she's always straight over with a hug and g'day and a bit of a chat. So she's always going to have a special place for in the TCT hearts, that's for certain. Okay, John, NRL.
Yes. So moving on to the first game chronologically, which takes place tomorrow night. I think it's probably the main slot for most people here. 7:50 p.m. Kickoff out at CommBank Stadium. It is home game for the Parramatta Eels, back to paradise as they host the Melbourne Storm. It is 14-3 on the ladder. And the Melbourne Storm, they lose Jerome Hughes and they lose Trent Loiero. They get back Ryan Pappenhausen. They get back Cameron Munster. They get
As
back
I said last night,
Grant
John,
Anderson.
who?
Yeah, exactly. Even someone like Grant Anderson shouldn't be slept on too. Another really
Neville's,
solid,
mate.
yeah.
Neville's.
So their back line looks way more balanced compared to recent weeks with the inclusions of the star fullback and 5'8". So they look like this quickly. Obviously, Pappenhausen takes over at fullback with that flowing peroxide mullet. Grant Anderson and Xavier Coates are on the wings. Jack Howarth and Nick Meaney are in the centres. Cam Munster works alongside Tyron Wishart in the halves. Stefano Utoikamanu, former Parramatta Eels prospect, will lead their front row. He's joined in the front row by Harry Grant, the captain, and Josh King. Sean Bloor, Eliasai Katoa, and Tui Kamikamifa in the back row for the Melbourne Storm. Obviously, Tui taking over from Trent Loiero at lock forward. Then on the interchange, Jonah Pezzett. Interesting inclusion there because he is a frontline halfback, but taking place as the bench utility. Not sure if Craig Bellmy's got some shenanigans he's going to pull with the roster ahead of kickoff. But joining Pezzett provisionally on the interchange is Atavali Lazati, Bronson Garlick, and Joe Chan. Extended roster, Bradley McDonald, Tuamalatu Brown, Pahalu, and Valepu. And then for the Parramatta Eels, no changes to their top 17, which means Joash Papali is at fullback, Zach Lomax and Will Penasini on the right, Sean Russell and Josh Adakar on the left, Dean Hawkins partners the captain, Mitchell Moses in the halves, Jermaine Hopgood, or as we like to say, Jermaine Propgood, works in the front row alongside Junior Barlaw, Riley Smith at dummy half, Charlie Goma will be on the right edge, Jack Williams the left, Dylan Walker at lock forward, then the interchange, Talon De Silva, Luca Moretti, Matt Dury, Sam Tuavaiti, Jordan Samrani, Kelma Tuilagi, Bailey Simonsson, Tony Mattelli, and Dylan Brown, the extended bench options for the coach. Should he want to pull the trigger on a potential game day swap, as you alluded to, Chris, maybe if someone like Kelma becoming a factor. Otherwise, though, Eels as per the program from their win against the Brisbane Broncos.
Yeah, Chris, it's pretty hard to change a winning lineup, isn't it?
Particularly after a win like that. I mean, those guys, they played their hearts out on a hostile territory. I think you probably saw the little article I wrote this week on the website, just outlining how Parramatta seems to lift in those games up in Brisbane, and we sort of get past them more often than we perhaps should, given our respective place on the ladder. But
Chris,
yeah,
I was just wondering about that as well, because I think that some of those games up in Brisbane, because of the level of Eels supporters up there, just the sheer number and the support that they give in person, it's almost a home game away from home at times against the Broncos. That the passion for Queensland from Queensland-based Eels supporters is phenomenal. And I know we have a lot that listen to the podcast, and we get to meet many of them because part of that passion will involve them travelling down to get to a home game at least once during the year. And they always make a point of coming in and saying g'day to us. And It's been some of the highlights that we've had over the years at our Leagues Club appearances has been having Queensland-based supporters there and just making those appearances even more fun. But when I read your article, I just thought, you know what, that support up there over the years has surely also been a factor, because when you hear the Parramatta chant coming through on the microphones in the broadcast coverage, it's a thing of beauty, because you know it's spontaneous, you know it's organic. It hasn't come from from being encouraged via a recorded chant or recorded drums or an MC who's encouraging the crowd to get behind the team. It is a beautiful thing to hear it coming through at an away game and as loud as it can get up there in Suncorp. So sorry for interrupting, but I just think our Queensland Eels supporters need a lot of acknowledgement for how our Eels have performed in Brisbane against the Broncos over the years.
That support's even more impressive when you consider they're drowning out the Brisbane fans who all have two heads, and so presumably two mouths as well. So well done,
yes, mate.
But yeah, Melbourne Storm boys, they are the challenge this week. They come into this game on the back of a win against the Roosters. I believe it was a win, right? Where Harry Grant was on absolute on fire. And I know Pappenhausen's there, I know Munster's there, and they both love a big game against the Parramatta Eels. But I can't help but look at that team and say, we got to put a lid on Harry Grant. Our ruck defence has to be on point, no laziness at marker, because he will exploit it. And he's come up with some big moments against us. That Golden Point try a couple of years back is the one that really stands out.
I'm trying to forget that, John.
Yeah. And what was otherwise, that would have broken the streak, right? That game.
It would have, and also the penalty that we didn't receive when Josh Hodgson was penalised.
You're right about that.
It should have been a penalty to us.
Yeah, it completely changes the flow of that game. Yeah, but yeah, the Eels as close as any team to breaking the legendary round one streak for the Melbourne Storm. But Harry Grant had other designs alongside the referee too. But Melbourne always such a challenge. But the Eels playing pretty well at CommBank. We have not been blown out at CommBank by any means by the Melbourne Storm. Not so much at other venues. Magic Round has been a really bad place to beat the Melbourne Storm up at Suncorp. Mm-hmm. But Eels, again, the result last week, it's only part of the picture. That was the fruition of months of hard work. Can they repeat it against Melbourne? Because we looked at those Ricky Stewart comments, and certainly the Eels are not being taken lightly across the code now, regardless of their ladder position. And you can't imagine Craig Bellamy is going to come into this game sleeping on what the Eels are capable of.
No. I'm sorry. You, Chris.
No, I mean, Parramatta's been improving, but I think there's a few things I don't like about this matchup. So we've been struggling through the middle, and you look at this Melbourne side with their pack, and the fact that Harry Grant can just play so effectively if the forwards get a roll on. Even last week against Brisbane play the ball speed. I haven't looked at the stats, but certainly the eye test suggested that they were marching downfield. The other thing to think about as well is we were very brave last week against Brisbane and deserved getting the 2 points, but we were the beneficiaries of some very sloppy Brisbane play. You know, I think Reece Walsh was particularly guilty of being very rocks and diamonds in that game. Melbourne will not do that. They will make us beat them. They will not hand us the game in the way that Brisbane sort of did. So that's the part that makes me worried. Do we have the class to break down Melbourne? We play well at CommBank. Mitchell Moses is there. Anything's possible, but I think this is a different level to what we faced last week.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that, Chris. You're talking about the Eels now playing a genuine premiership favourite. And although they're lacking Jerome Hughes, we know that they are a team that have embedded systems and structures, and its next man up philosophy has been there basically for the duration of their existence. You could even argue before Bellamy got there, but Bellamy's now, he's almost been a lifetime coach for them. And you know that it is a rare thing that they don't perform in a game. The difference between their best and their worst in most seasons is minimal. And yes, they will miss some of the individual talent that Jerome Hughes brings to the table every week. But you also know that in having Wishart there, that he's got the confidence to have a crack at playing what's in front of him just as much. It's why he's a player that's talked about by other clubs for recruitment as well. And they might lose a little bit with Hughes not being there, but let's face it, he'd be a first grade halfback at most other clubs, or first grade somewhere.
Yeah, something inside the top 13
clubs.
for plenty of other clubs. Yeah, he's carved out a fantastic niche as the super utility at Melbourne, but he could be so much more if he was willing to leave the Storm. But it's a great setup, and he probably his argument would be, I play my best football at Melbourne, regardless of where they play me, so I'll stick around.
John, so how did the Eels engineer a victory against the Storm?
There is duality here. It's like push and pull, isn't it? Because you, without trying to be punny, you have to weather the storm that they're going to throw at you early on. You cannot let them get out to an early lead, because one try becomes two, becomes four very quickly against Melbourne if you're not going to be able to put the clamps on what they're throwing at you. And we saw that in round one, where the Eels actually, if you go back and review the footage, the Eels are actually there for quite a bit, and then suddenly they weren't because they couldn't hold out those early points, and then Melbourne turned that into a monster halftime lead. So I think the first questions need to be answered are on defense. And that means, as you mentioned, Chris, around the ruck, you've got to be much stronger, much tighter, can't afford those moments of looseness that we showed against the Brisbane team, because Melbourne, with Harry Grant and company, will steamroll you there. And then on the other side, you got to ask questions. You got to answer and ask at the same time, which I suppose is a lawyer term, asked and answered. But in this case, you need to be able to be physical through the middle, and you got to be willing to be expansive too, because Melbourne's system, if you just go vanilla against them, they'll just eat you up. And that puts pressure on you then to be high completion rate while being expansive and adventurous, which is to Parramatta's, I suppose, strength or opportunity, is something they've been doing for a while now, is trying to find that balance. But this is perhaps the ultimate litmus test of how much can you get away with shifting the ball around and changing the point of attack against a very staunch defense without turning the ball over cheaply. And for the Eels, Mitchell Moses being back is huge, because we played them in round one without Moses. We had to thrust Ronald Volkman into the starting position because Dean Hawkins was also injured. So that completely changes the equation for the blue and gold. Alongside that, you've got more seasoned performances coming out of the likes of Riley Smith and Sam Tuilagi, who also featured early on in that game. I think defensively the Eels are much better this time around. That's not to say that Melbourne can't score points, but yeah, you're playing the two different sort of games at the same time, in being really strong defensively, or as strong as you can be without letting Melbourne get a lead, while also not being too conservative offensively, because Melbourne you can't be ultra vanilla against Melbourne because they just gobble that up. So you've got to find that very difficult balance.
Yeah, and look, I agree there, John, because you're not going to win the game without scoring a certain number of points against the Storm, because they will score points. So it's a matter of restricting them as much as you can, plus also asking enough questions that you're going to put some scoreboard pressure on the Storm. And that might seem like the most basic thing to say about rugby league.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, in a bottle it is, but Melbourne make it so much more difficult. And like you always say, you don't appreciate how relentless Melbourne are until you watch them live, and you just see whether you argue they're offside or not, their relentless line speed, their ability to encroach and put pressure on not just on the opposition team but on the referee, and they take a stranglehold on the game and they make you play at their pace, which is a breakneck pace, and it's so hard to go with them blow for blow, set for set, and that is going to be a big challenge for the Parramatta Eels. Look, we've got the strike to make some big questions. Mitchell Moses' kicking game to Zach Lomax will be a big feature here. We saw him find his range with that nice little chip kick against the Broncos for Zach's second try. Josh Papali, a player who is still in his infancy as an NRL player, he's the sort of player that can be frustrating for Melbourne to try and defend. His ability to use footwork to change the point of attack and pop up on either side of the ruck is the sort of thing that they don't like to see. But likewise, the Eels, I mentioned Harry Grant, someone like Katoa, that's a big danger man right there. Jerome Hughes been out, maybe bluntens his impact a little bit, but big back roll, can run a great line, is also a threat with the kicking game. Eels have got to have sort of call-outs constantly to watch out what he's doing. So, yeah, a lot of really interesting matchups, and keen to hear what Chris has as his key positional matchups across the park.
Yeah, so Chris, what are those key positional matchups for you?
Well, I mean, the way you've just outlined it makes it sound so easy. I mean, throw the ball around, but don't drop it. Put scoreboard.
And I mean, that is the challenge, isn't it? It's like, it is defend resolutely, throw the ball around aggressively, and yeah, sure, maybe you got a chance to beat the Melbourne Storm. Just don't make mistakes because they will throttle you, they'll strangle you. Don't blink on defense because they'll score 3 tries.
But in all seriousness, John, you want those questions asked, but at the same time, you want some of the essentials in the game. For example, you score points, complete the set after the kickoff.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe you don't go throwing the ball around in your own quarter and drop the ball.
You hope that with Mitchell Moses back, that becomes a real point of focus of the Parramatta Eels is you fire your shots, but then there are times where you put the pistol back in the holster and just put your head down and get downfield.
Yeah, sometimes that getting the team on the back, the opposition on the back foot, can come from simply getting a set completed after you get points on the board and putting them back.
Look at Melbourne
on their own try line.
They are the blueprint for it.
Yeah.
Building pressure
absolutely.
and as we like to say, situational football. There are times where you fire your shots. There are times when you get to work. There are times when you just build pressure. And sometimes just doing your job, as boring as it is what leads to success, not even like in the long term, but in the immediate future, because the pressure you apply on your opposition, and it leads to a mistake or a lapse of concentration.
Yeah, so let's get to the pointy end of this discussion, Chris, and we'll let you start off. How do the Eels beat the Storm, and then your prediction of the result, the score, first try scorer, best on field?
I think if you look at the contrast between the two forward packs, we've got a lot of good ball players in our forward pack. If you look, starting with Junior, but then also Hopgood, obviously, creative lock forward in Dylan Walker. I think our pack probably offers a little bit more in terms of shape and being able to provide width as well. They're bigger. They're probably going to win the meter advantage. I think it's going to be key that between our two halves, they both have good kicking games. I think if you put it in the corners, make Melbourne work it off their line. Without Jerome Hughes, the opportunity for Melbourne to shift early and shift wide is probably lessened. So I don't mind getting into a grind with Melbourne. I think that we just got to kick him to submission, kick him to death, and then let our forwards do their thing, get the offload going, and play off the back of that. And look, this is a Parramatta Eels podcast, so in terms of my score prediction, I say with no confidence at all, I'm going to say it's going to be Parramatta 20, Melbourne 16. But in reality, I don't know if we're going to get it done. But I think realistically, we were down 46-6 at halftime in the first round game. We then went on to kind of win the second half, but they really put their cue in the rack. I think if we if we get close to Melbourne in this game and show just how far we've come over the last 3 months or 4 or 5 months or whatever it is, I'll be happy with that. So, look, I'll say Parramatta by less than a converted try, but realistically, I'd be happy if we can run them close.
And who's your prediction for first try scorer and best on field? First try scorer for the Eels and best on field for the Eels.
First try scorer, I'm going to say this. This will be one that the commentators will love. Moses bomb, Lomax just launching over the top of Xavier Coates to take the bomb and score. And best on field, this is very unlikely because it's not a sexy pick. But I just love what Charlie Guymer's been bringing in recent weeks. He's an absolute meat axe, and just watching him just iron blokes, tackle after tackle, he's been a revelation. I mean, it ended up being quite a big blow losing Katonga. He came along in leaps and bounds from the start of the season. He's really got he's really become topic mess improved.
Yeah, and there is part of me that really wishes the Eels had, and I know they've still without a couple of key players, but this team with Yongi and Katonga, and then the chance to redeploy Joash Papali, whether it's 5'8" or elsewhere, could have asked some fantastic questions in Melbourne Storm. And I think if you're talking about tips, realistically, Melbourne are the favourites here, and I think that they do win this. I'm in accordance with you, Chris, that if the Eels are anywhere near competitive on the scoreboard, that is a huge win. Given that Melbourne are in finals mode right now, they're gearing up. Canberra are probably going to win them on a premiership. But Melbourne, 2 wins back, they need to win to stay in touch with it. They're also trying to get a top 2 seed in the finals to get that home field advantage against whether it's Canterbury or the Warriors or whoever else, the Panthers maybe. So they've got so much on the line right now. They're going to be playing good football. I think they are favourites. I think tipping them is boring. So we go with the Parramatta Eels, of course. Parramatta, I mean, any win would be huge. So maybe it's going to be another narrow one, maybe 26-24, because I think you have to score more than 20 points to beat the Melbourne Storm, and limiting them is going to be the big challenge. For the Eels, first try scorer, who did we have last week for first try scorer? It wasn't
Rusty.
Was it Rusty? Was he chip and chase? Was that it? Wasn't it? Yeah, it was Rusty's chip and chase. That was the first try scored. So I don't know if I can back the breakout player for a second outrageous chip and chase try, but maybe I'll go to. I said Jack Williams last week, but it didn't work out. Maybe Dylan Walker scores one instead of setting one up this week. He gets a chance to play back up to someone else making a break and scoring a try. So let's go with Dylan Walker. And then best on field. I try to avoid picking him because it is boring, but the only way the Parramatta Eels beat the Melbourne Storm is if Mitchell Moses plays a blinder. And, it is a super boring pick, but I think that is the reality of the situation. If it's not Mitchell Moses, if I had to go to someone else, Zach Lomax is just another boring pick. Just another boring pick. Maybe Jermaine Hopgood can continue his rise in form and have a real cornerstone game on the season with a big effort against Melbourne.
Fellas, I think we have to create fatigue in this Melbourne Storm team. And completions, I think, have to be really high. And, yeah, we want questions asked, but I want that little bit of boring football in there with kicking to the corners and making them work harder than they possibly should. I don't want them on the front foot at any stage, but the Storm are going to be on the front foot. I really encourage supporters to get out there on Thursday night. It's not an ideal night to be there. Who knows, maybe the weather's not going to be great either. But the team needs our support. And also, if you haven't watched the Storm before, to get an appreciation of just the way that they play, as John indicated, because sometimes you watch it and you just go, my goodness, how can anyone defend that? What they're throwing, the speed that they play at, and the television does not do any justice to the type of football that the Storm can play when they're at their peak. Like you both have said, if the Eels are competitive on the scoreboard, it will be a major indicator of how far the Eels have come this year. And I think we will be competitive on the scoreboard because that first round was like a team that really didn't understand their roles, which is it's logical. And there were times where it looked like they fell back into old systems because it was so new to them how Jason Rolls wanted them to play, and they looked lost. They just really looked lost as a team. They don't look lost anymore. And I think we will ask questions. We need a big game from Mitch Moses again. We need the forwards to really be competitive in the middle. Maybe they're not going to win the meters, Chris, as you indicated that they won't. But if they play the right sort of game, if they can create fatigue, it'll go a long way towards the sort of questions that we want to ask with the type of football that Parramatta plays. My goodness, who would have picked that the first try last week would have been a chip chase from Sean Russell? Like, it just... but this is what we're seeing, where the coaches are prepared for the players to back themselves and play what's in front of them. And I think that's part of the beauty of watching Parramatta develop as a unit this year, is you can see that players are backing themselves and are growing as players. I think a very similar scoreline to what you've suggested, Chris. I'll go 24-20 to the Eels. I'll go first try scorer to Jermaine Propgood. And I think it'll be a little bit of early domination by our forwards. I reckon they'll step up to the mark. And as for best on field, I'm going to double it up. I'll go with Jermaine to be best on field. So, fellas, I think that just about wraps things up. We've hit about the hour
15 roughly.
Hour and a quarter mark.
So we only overshot slightly, so it didn't delay Chris too much, but we do appreciate him going into overtime for the tip sheet.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining us, Chris. It's always great that we have you on here, and you certainly have an entertaining take on what's happening, and I know the listeners love your presence on our podcast. So we'll see what we can aim for with our recording of previews to be able to fit this in until such time as you change time zones again for the live podcasts. Of course, again, our shout out to the sponsors, Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta Leagues Club. We'll see you in Sturlo's on Thursday night. Looking forward to everyone that comes in there and says g'day. Look for any promos we put out on socials if we get word of having a special guest in the club. Thank you to everyone for listening, and don't forget, no matter what you are watching this on or listening to this on, if you can give it a like and subscribe, that will be much appreciated. And fellas, as always say, go you mighty Eels.